Hello, John, from online events. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the organisation?
Hi, Claire. A real privilege to be here and to be talking about online events and for online events to be partnering with this conference. Really pleased to be doing that too. Yes, usually I'm the one asking the questions, so it feels a little bit weird today. But what to say? Well, I finished my training as a therapist in 2005, so I've been in practice for almost 16 years now. I Sandra, my sister, and I co-founded Online Events in 2009. So we're going into our 12th year, which seems
Wow.
incredible, really. The time has passed so quickly. I do some other things too. I'm also the director at Temenos Education, where we have a diploma in person-centered counselling and psychotherapy. And I'm also a large group facilitator. That's one of my passions as well. So all of those things kind of coalesce into the work that we do at online events, making learning experiences available online to counsellors and psychotherapists and coaches and other colleagues from the helping professions, I guess.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I know you don't think of yourself as an activist per se, but we were talking earlier about the impact that Rogers brought to our professions and how radical he was at the time.
Yes. It was interesting we were talking about that, especially in relation to this conference. And
Mm.
Sandra and I have always been clear that we're in business, our desire has been to do that business well, to really take care of the people that we meet, that we're working with, that come to be in our events. But I think one of the things that really excited me as I was training about Roger's work was how anti-establishment it was, how
Mm.
radical that work
Mm.
was. And that was a brand new world for me because I come from a world that's much more constricted and conservative, and so that was very exciting. But of course, when I then met the reality of the counselling world, although it has the values, and we bring those values of freedom, and there's a real radical element to the work that we do
Mm.
as therapists. It seemed to me that and this is the human condition, I think, that we often move towards institutionalizing ourselves.
Yeah.
And that was a big tension I could see in the world of CPD, that we're trying to inhabit those values that are really about personal freedom and collective freedom. But often those experiences would be behind very expensive paywalls,
Mm.
expensive conferences, expensive workshops, and of course it's hard to do all that. You know, if you're putting on an event, you're paying for a venue,
Sure.
you've got speakers that need to be paid. These are not easy tensions to hold. But Sandra and I, as we then were becoming CPD providers, really in the midst of the financial crisis, just as
Mm.
at the end of the first decade of the 21st century, we were thinking, how can we have a financial model that can take care of making learning accessible to everyone? And part of that was about disrupting the institutional nature of learning and counselling and
Yeah.
psychotherapy.
And online events just blew it apart, really. The thing that really uh, impacted me when online events began was that it was free. It was open to anyone who had access to the internet. That was a massive change. And, a decade and more before the before COVID, but you were ready when COVID came because of the model that you used back in what 2009.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, we've been running that model where when we're recording interviews, we would do that without charge.
Mm.
So colleagues who had no resources for CPD could come and enjoy and contribute to those experiences. And then we kept our lights on by running a library with a small subscription charge. So we kind of managed to scrape by for a lot of years doing that. And lots of colleagues contributed to the library, including yourself, Claire, by offering to be in those conversations and not be paid also. So that allowed us to gather a huge amount of learning. I think we're closing in on 1,000 hours of learning in our library, which is
It's
incredible.
amazing.
Yeah. So we kind of thought of colleagues who are, oh, sorry, Claire,
No, go ahead.
well, colleagues who didn't have much cash but had a little bit more time could fit our schedule and be available for the free events while we were recording. And maybe if someone had a client in that hour where we're recording the interview, we'd have a little bit extra financial resources and they would be able to afford just a little for the library. So that was our philosophy over those years. And I think it was a very disrupting philosophy as well. So we were really pleased to offer that to colleagues who didn't have much resources.
Sure. And so many of the people that have headed up the CPD aren't the superstars. They are ordinary therapists. They're not authors. They're not workshop promoters. And, you know, it's fine. You also have had people who are all those things. But you've focused on, I think, people who are practitioners, who day to day they sometimes specialize, but they have a particular interest in something. They have certain skills and expertise in it. And so they come to talk to all therapists and, you know, beyond therapy, anyone can join and listen to these talks. That strikes me as being radical.
Yes, that was been another value or goal that Sandra and I have held, is to not get lost in the hierarchy that also exists in the therapy world. So often we've got to climb to the top of a hierarchy to be heard, for our ideas to get some kind of platform. And we wanted to be a platform where you didn't need to do that to have your ideas heard and experienced by other colleagues. It's been such a thrill for me. I think most of my learning as a therapist have come from other colleagues who are just working away at the coalface.
Exactly that. We're so strapped for time, John, but I really want to get in, even if we don't have much time to talk about it, the link, and I think it's an unconscious link, between being an activist and not charging money for your work. I'm not sure about that. I think it's something that our professions need to talk about more. We certainly need to talk about money a lot more than we do. Do you have any thoughts on that issue?
Yes, I think it's one that is in that domain around power. And I think these are difficult conversations in the world of therapy, money and power. And part of the reason that it's been such an area of exploitation for as long as humans have been around, I guess. Yeah. So that's also, Sandra and I have thought a lot about, like, how do we keep the lights on? How do we provide for ourselves? How do we be in business? And one of the things about business is you need money to keep an organization going, but do it in a way that's anti-oppressive, that is particularly not exploitative. And I think that's a real challenge, and one that needs continual thinking about. And to be thinking about, how do we take care of all the transactions in the field? And that is, it's a slight tangent that maybe we don't have much time for, but money is not the only transaction. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And we do need to eat.
We do need to eat. We go to a conference and we're often paying for the person who has developed the expertise. But the colleague who's presenting is also receiving in that transaction, in terms of, like, the person needs an audience to deliver the
Yes.
experience. Often the learning in the counselling field is conversational. It's not always didactic. And so everything that we bring in the conversation is also important to that transaction. If we are not there to partake in that interaction, we're adding value in terms of our own experience and our own ideas, our own questions as part of the audience. So that's also power and needs to be valued. So Sandra and I have needed to think about how do we gather financial resources to make our work, but also value the other resources that are in those transactions.
John, we could talk about this endlessly, and maybe we should. But for now, we need to draw to a close. Thank you so much. And I look forward to speaking to you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, for the opportunity of the conversation. Thank you.
Good morning, this is Dr. Dwight Turner. I've been asked to provide a video about activism and how this plays a role in psychotherapy as a psychotherapist. It's going to be a couple of minutes long, but I'll do my best to talk about where I'm coming from with regards to this. Okay, to start a bit, for those who don't know who I am, probably the majority of you watching this, I'm Dr. Dwight Turner. I've been a psychotherapist for about 20 years now. I trained up in London as a therapist, doing a postgrad diploma course, like many of you will probably be doing who are watching this or who have done already. My career involved me actually doing a lot of activism work in the early days, for example, at a place called on the Aylesbury Estate in southeast London. And when I started working there, servicing the less accessible communities of southeast London, that was where my work in actually helping out people actually started to begin, basically. My work then moved on to working in mental health, where I worked for a service user-led group out of the Maudsley Hospital for a couple of years. And they did a lot of advocacy work around trying to change the perceptions of mental health in the black community, which is great stuff. They used to like performances and stuff like that, and so on. And then I actually moved to do my doctorate, which is around otherness and privilege, which I completed in 2017. It's not even that long ago. And I started that actually at a time of, we were basking in the glow of a post-racial society. That old cliche that turned out to be absolute nonsense at the end of the day. And by the time I finished, the whole world had changed and Donald Trump was in power in the States and we'd moved towards Brexit here in the UK. And actually our human rights, if you like, have become more important for us to be aware of than ever before. And these are the same rights that had left a lot of people on the Aylesbury estate disadvantaged, because working with working class communities and immigrant communities as well, who needed counselling support and so on. And these were the same rights that had left people within mental health, the persons of colour who were in the mental health system feeling disadvantaged and without a voice and so on. So a lot of my work has always had an element of advocacy and activism attached to it. But I think this has become more prevalent now because there is a greater need for a voice for those who are on the outside, who are the other, for example. And my work centers a lot around ideas of privilege and otherness and how the two are actually co-joined within each of us on an unconscious level, but how on a more societal or cultural level, those parts will play themselves out ad infinitum, because they're split in two. So one group will will hold the privilege and they'll oppress the other group, which will hold a sense of otherness. Something that Lacan even talked about, where he even mentions that the divine order, or divine order is my phrase, where the actual natural, inverted commas, order of things is that the ego has dominion over the shadow, if you like. So my work as an activist is actually about trying to recognize, or helping people recognize, that actually the shadow is always there and it will keep knocking on the door from the outside. It has a lot to say about culture, about who we are as individuals and as a group and so on. And without that knowledge, we're not changing. Nothing will grow. Hegel's ideas about culture moving forward aren't going to come to pass because we're so resistant. This, for me, says that the work that we do as therapists, as human beings, has a real moral core to it. A moral core to create change, to develop change and growth within us as individuals and as a society. And without that change, nothing will progress. But I also think that because it's got a moral core and it's coming through us, it's not just it's coming through us, that we can't actually resist it. It will be here regardless. So my call to arms for all of you who are watching this video right now is to keep fighting for change. Whatever change that is, that moves you, keep fighting for it. Okay? Right. That's my morning rant done on this topic. Wishing you all the best. Hope all is well. Let you get going. Take care. Goodbye.